Welcome to the second episode of Policy in Wonderland. I'm your host, Eviatar Amira, or you can call me Evi. In Policy in Wonderland, just like Alice, we are going to explore and see the wonderful world of insurance, InsurTech, and everything that's connected to this amazing ecosystem. In Policy in Wonderland, you will meet startups from all over the world, key figures, and more. So without further ado, I want to introduce my guests for today, David Gritz and Stacy Brown. Hello, guys. How are you doing today?
Thanks
Hi,
for
Eddie.
having us.
Thank you for joining. So I assume that the audience know who you are, but for those who don't, I would like to hear a bit about yourself and your background. David, let's start with you.
Sure. Yeah. So I run InsurTech New York. We're an ecosystem based in New York, but really serve startups from all over the world. We've had a number of startups from Israel join our accelerator program, apply to our startup competitions, and participate in our MGA lab. Actually, one of the company's link site was focused on swimming pool safety, came from Israel. So our goal is really to support the ecosystem by providing opportunities for connection and really take advantage of what's in New York and the companies that are willing to come to New York.
I'm Stacy Brown, and I founded InsurTech Hartford several years ago. I had 20 years of experience as an IT exec working for large global carriers, and it came to a point where the InsurTech ecosystem was hard to do as a side hobby with a full-time job. So this year in 2023, I have ventured into it full time and have started to expand in helping build other communities as well across the U.S., such as InsurTech Chicago and InsurTech Atlanta. And I'm also an investor, advisor, and InsurTech Hartford also runs an innovation challenge where we get companies from all over the world as well. And it's just an exciting time to be in the industry. When I started in 2001, I had absolutely no idea that this is what my life would look like today, but here I am.
So it's far, far away from your dad idea to be in a gas station management, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's far,
That
far
was
away.
even further back, yeah.
So I want you to listen to the following quote. We have been going to conference for the last few years, lots of activities, lots of things are going on. But sometimes I think it will be nice to do something a little different. Do you know who say that? Stacy, is you 4 years ago on the ITC 4 years ago. So
Wow, you take good notes.
yeah, very good. So this is leading me to the next question. What is in shooting slopes going to be different?
Yeah. So Stacy and I have been going to InsurTech events probably since they started in 2015 and in the original InsurTech Connect in 2016. And what we've found about those events is they're extremely productive, but they're also extremely draining. So when you go there after a week, you almost need the weekend just to sleep all day. And a lot of times at the conference, you're creating very much on the surface connections. Like there's not so much you can learn about a person when you meet them for 15 minutes and the first 3 minutes you're looking for each other. So what Stacy and I sought to do is to forge deeper connections, and not just the connections between the people, but also the connections with the natural earth or the natural environment. And some of the most beautiful places that we found in the world are on ski slopes or out in the environment. We haven't just done ski related events. We've done whitewater rafting. We've done
Wow.
trail walking. So really the idea behind slopes, trails, and rapids has been to bring together a small group of people, so predominantly InsurTech founders and investors, to build strong connections over a 2 or 3 day period, really get to know the human behind the company, and not just, the name of the company and the title and couple facts, but really get to know people well. And that's the connections that we're trying to create with slopes.
And for me, a big part of it is experience driven, right? The bonds and the relationships and the way they harden through through the experiences that David and I have been putting together is pretty amazing. And there's a lot of content out there. There's a lot of gatherings with events. Even post pandemic, it's even more so than it was, back in 2018 when I said that quote. But this is a very different opportunity. It's exclusive, right? We limit it to 40 people, and the target audience are investors and founders, right? So it's purposeful as well, right? The idea is that there are investable companies interested in raising. If they're not raising today, they're planting seeds for the future. And the investors love getting to meet potential investments, but they also benefit from spending time and getting to know each other because, as a lot of people know in the VC world, a lot of people do deals together. So it's just it's a very focused event for that purpose, and we build that experience around it to really make it more meaningful.
Yeah,
it's a very good spotlight on the people in this industry, because as you mentioned, there's a lot of conference but people going to, okay, let's close the deal, or the purpose is only one. But here you see the people behind the deals, behind the business. You can see the founders, you can see the investor, as you mentioned, and this is a really good opportunity to find that.
Yeah, I think one thing people don't really think about, especially if you're a founder raising money for the first time, or you're recently joined into venture capital, is that the relationships that you have with founders are not measured in days, weeks, or months, but they're usually measured in years, if not decades. So what better way, to spend an immersive 2 days with someone that ultimately is going to be your partner for the next decade?
Couldn't agree more. You have a book with Brian Folchak, right, about collaboration. And I think this is one of the point of view of collaboration, because especially in the insurance industry, you need a long distance not long distance, but a long relationship terms with the InsurTech, with the insurance company, investors, and so on.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, why Brian and I wrote the book is that we've heard from a lot of startups that it can be a struggle to work with the incumbent insurers and brokers. I mean, what's surprising is there was no specific rule about, from the data that we gathered, about specifically the size, whether small carriers or large carriers are better to work with. I mean, you would think intuitively it might be easier for small carriers, but it really comes down to the right mindset. So the easy part in the beginning is getting the executive buy-in. The hard part is being able to work together through issue resolution, maintaining the right amount of resources for the length of the project, and really making sure that everyone understands their roles and they kind of maintain those roles balanced throughout the entire project or the life of the relationship.
So what are the most important tips that you could give to InsurTech founders when they are fundraising, okay, or target to fundraising? And like just say they meet investors such on the ski slopes or something like that, and also the opposite, tips to the investor when they talking to InsurTech founders.
Well, one thing I'd say for founders is to be ready for it, right? So I've heard many of investors talking about how the startups that come in to present to them, they can't even understand what they're talking about. Like they've been talking for 5 minutes and I still have no idea what your product is, who your customer is, what are you trying to do, right? So practice helps, right? So practicing on there's a level of practice that you get when you actually start pitching for real in front of real investors, but certainly you need to make sure that you're litmus testing your stuff with other experts and other people who understand the industry before you're taking up that precious time of the investors. Because on the other side of it, sometimes investors aren't, maybe it's not a right fit, which is at the moment, which is the reason why they might say no today. It's not your business and it's not your product. It's just their portfolio and their needs and focus at the moment. But if you make a good impression, to David's earlier point of this is a long-term business. These relationships last a decade or decades, right? So making a good impression is as important as making sure that you're presenting yourself well. So be prepared.
And for the investor side?
So on the investor side, I would share, a few tips on terms of finding the right startups for you. So the first thing I would say for investors is to be open-minded. There's a lot of investors that have a very prescribed philosophy of what they're looking for, a B2B SaaS company that has, 2 to 5 million in revenue. The founder has had a previous exit and, the company is growing 20% month over month. And yeah, that is a great stat to run towards, and especially if you're a generalist investor. But I think for an InsurTech oriented investor, InsurTechs come in a lot of different shapes and sizes, right? So it's a software company, especially enterprise software. They could close a tier 1 carrier that might be a multi-million-dollar contract. So that's not going to follow the 20% month over month growth because they might have taken 18 months to close that deal. But that's going to change the game for them, not only to get other customers, but for their core basis, that might make them break even. So I think being open-minded on that, and then also on the MGA side, being open-minded. There's a lot of investors that have shied away from MGAs because essentially, the big ones, many that have kind of ties to Israel, whether it's Lemonade or Hippo, Metro Mile, or States Title, they got really high valuations and then they lost those valuations. But what I think a lot of the investors don't necessarily think about is, a startup that is in auto personal lines is different than a life focused startup, is different than a surety focused startup, and is completely different from a startup that's focusing on a niche commercial line like aviation. So I think you have to look at the line of business, the loss ratios, and the specific environment and competition of that line of business, and not just say, MGAs are great or MGAs are terrible. The second piece of advice that I would have for the investors, especially those that plan to attend InsurTech slopes, and this might be obvious, but I think, be open to working with the other investors and sharing information. There's a number of VC to VC calls that I've had where the other investors don't want to tell me the name of the company and just want to get my feedback and help on diligence. And I think what they don't realize is, first, with us, we'll probably know just by you describing the company, which is what ended up happening on that call. And in fact, we actually had the founder speak at our spring conference. But the separate piece is that, withholding information, especially between investors, doesn't help the ecosystem. Ultimately, startups are going to need capital in their seed stage, in their Series A, in their Series B, and if they want to go public, in the growth stage. And ultimately, when investors share information with each other, they're candid with each other, that's ultimately going to produce an environment where you're not necessarily fighting over deals, but you're helping the startups together improve the environment and having more deals get to exit. That's all we all want, right? We want more deals getting to exit. So if we bicker over, individual allocations, we're not necessarily promoting the overall goal. And then, the last thing that I would say for investors. It's the same thing that Stacy gave in terms of the startups. Come prepared. For our past events, we've had a WhatsApp group or a Slack group. We share the people that are attending. So, do a little bit of research on who's there so you can really maximize your time and know who you want to spend the most time with, who you want to be on the chairlift with. And I think that will make your time as productive as possible.
Awesome. Let's do a zoom out and talk as experienced players in the InsurTech arena. What are your top 3 predictions for the most transformative trends that will shape the industry in 2025? Not next month, but 2025 or 2026 even.
I'll start with a couple, and then Stacy, if you want to take a couple.
Sure.
Okay. So I'm gonna start with the most contrarian one, and maybe it's because we run the MGA lab. We are a little biased, but I think right now a lot of investors are not super excited about MGAs, and I think MGAs are going to come back. They're going to be more exciting. They're going to be the hot thing again, but it's not necessarily going to be the next, personal lines auto of the world. It's going to be different specialized areas. Like I mentioned, Linksite that focuses on swimming pool safety and general liability, or it's going to be 5x5 that focus on aviation, or Flora that provides fertility benefits. So all these specialized niche areas that carriers have made a lot of money on, InsurTechs are going to find out, and they're going to join those lines of business and create new products. So that's, one trend that I'm very excited for. And it's not just InsurTechs themselves, but excess and specialty lines as a percentage of commercial has been growing. And I think it's only going to continue to grow. The second major trend that I see for 2025 is because all the carriers are suffering from high loss ratios, right? Whether it's from the natural disasters or it's from people texting and driving and wrecking cars and inflation and all those different causes that are making carriers lose money. The shift in focus is not going to be who can we get off our books and exclude and what states can we pull out of, but it's actually going to be how can we partner with the policyholders to harden their homes so when the hurricane hits, they don't lose all their windows and their roof. And how can they mitigate the risk of wildfires by clearing the space around their homes from shrubs or debris? And also in the commercial environment, how can we make every worker safer so we don't have liability or workers' comp claims?
Such like to be a proactive risk before they occur.
Yeah.
Stacy.
Well, yeah, preventative was one of my thoughts as well. Because insurance, everything, the speed of insurance doesn't necessarily follow our calendars very well, right? So, you have to look out at least at 2025 to be able to think about at what point in time does it look different than it does today, right? Because 6 months from now we're not going to feel very different, right? But definitely on the preventative side, there's been a lot of talk about that for a few years, and it's happening both in commercial and personal lines, and I think as consumers continue to adopt the technologies that they need, the key thing really comes down to behavior change, right? And education has to drive that. So it takes time, but I do think we will see for the carriers that have been investing in things like, let's say, IoT water sensors in homes or in businesses, right? Like they're reporting really strong ROIs, right? In the beginning, when they did that, it was kind of shooting into the darkness of night and not really knowing what they were going to hit, but they just had this feeling they were going to. Now they're starting to see the benefits. So I think we're going to see acceleration on technologies like that and anything on the preventative side. But I think AI hit this year really hard. I mean, we've had AI companies and AI technologies for a lot of years, but this year with ChatGPT, it made everybody say, hey, I can put my hands on this right now and I can use this right now. And I think by 2025, companies will have moved on from the exploring stage and will be having the value. I think somewhere between now and then, there's going to be education happening inside the large corporates to help people understand how to leverage AI better. They will have done the implementations, and it'll be a much more productive workforce. But there's a whole nother side, like the distribution side. I think tech adoption has been very slow on, like, we think it's slow on the carrier side. At least it moves. On the distribution side, it's a lot more difficult, right? And but I think there's things like in the States, we have Weston Labs now, Broker Tech Ventures, which is also in Israel, right? And I think there are people starting to pay more attention. The population demographics are also changing on the distribution side, where there's more of these progressive agents coming into the market, and they're like, hey, I don't want to do things like my dad did things, right? Like I want to have a tech-driven business. And I think somewhere between that and the light bulb starting to go off on people to realize that, hey, if I want to exit, my company running on technology probably get a better multiple than running on file cabinets. So I think somewhere over the next 2 years, we're going to start seeing a tipping point in the agency space.
I offered to David to do another episode after the event. So, and right, David? Yeah, we have okay on that?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah? Okay, great.
Happy to do it.
So great. Thank you guys for being in the show today. And thank you very much for what you are doing to the insurance community and bring insurance with a different perspective. And good luck in the event. Thanks you very much.
Thanks. Good to meet you, Abby.
You too.
See you. Bye.
Bye-bye.